You've seen Narcos, right? You've read the news. So you probably think you know the story of drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the legend, the mastermind, public enemy number one. But what if that whole story, the one sold to us by pop culture and even by governments, is just a really well-told lie? Okay, let's get into it.
We're going to start with this bombshell from Ed Calderon. And this is a guy who was actually there, on the front lines of Mexico's drug war for over a decade. He's saying that the man the entire world saw as the ultimate cartel boss was nothing close. I mean, that just flips the whole story on its head, right? So let's break down how this myth got built and what the reality actually looks like.
So, first up, the myth of El Chapo. How in the world did this one guy become the face of this massive global criminal empire, especially if he wasn't even the one calling the shots? Okay, so look at this. The difference between the myth and the reality is, well, it's just huge. On one side, you've got the legend we all know, the Netflix hero, the supposed Robin Hood figure, the guy who literally replaced Osama bin Laden as public enemy number one. But then you have the reality from people on the ground. To them, he was a scapegoat. A high-level guy for sure, but still just a mid-level player in the grand scheme of things. And honestly, a massive embarrassment to the authorities he kept escaping from. So why create this myth? Why was it so useful? Well, think about it from the Mexican government's perspective. His wild escapes were humiliating. So by turning him into a supervillain, catching him looked like this epic victory. And for the media, man, this story was pure gold. I mean, you remember that crazy Sean Penn article in Rolling Stone, right? He was the perfect flashy bad guy. Catching him made it seem like progress was being made in the war on drugs, all while his own family and pop culture were building him up into a folk hero. Okay, so if Chapo wasn't the big boss, the question is obvious, right? Who is? And the answer, well, it pulls back the curtain on a power structure that's way more complex and honestly, way more scary than just one guy. Okay, remember this name, Ismael El Mayo Zambada. This is the guy, the real power, the true head of the Sinaloa cartel for a long, long time. And here's the kicker. Unlike El Chapo, El Mayo has never, not once, been arrested. He's the quiet one, the ghost pulling the strings, completely ignored by the media spotlight that was so obsessed with his flashier partner. But it gets even deeper than that. The real power in Mexico, it isn't one cartel leader, it's not even the president. According to Calderon, the ultimate power is Mexico's military-industrial complex. We're talking high-ranking military officials. That's the center point for the real corruption. They're the ones making the backroom deals with cartels, deciding who gets powerful and who gets taken out. It's a level of rot in the system that makes the whole idea of a single kingpin look like a children's story. And all of this leads to a really important point. This was never just a Mexico problem. No way. This is a crisis that involves all of us, the whole continent. You really have to look at this as a three-way street where everyone shares the blame. Mexico, yeah, it's the center for production, and they are absolutely bearing the brunt of the horrific violence. But the United States? We provide the endless demand for drugs, and as you're about to see, contribute with some seriously messed up policies. And Canada is a huge market, and increasingly, a major hub for cleaning all that dirty money. It's a three-nation crisis, and pretending it's just one country's problem is exactly why it never gets solved. And if you want a perfect example of just how bad those policies can get, you have to hear about one of the most unbelievable, just mind-boggling operations the US government ever ran. Operation Fast and Furious. The plan sounds insane now, but here's what they did. The US government knowingly let people buy massive amounts of high-powered weapons and then just watched as those guns were smuggled or walked right into Mexico. The idea, the goal, was to track those guns to the big cartel leaders. So what happened? The reality? They lost them. They lost track of thousands of weapons. We're talking .50 caliber sniper rifles that went directly into the hands of the cartels, literally arming the enemy and fueling the exact violence they were supposed to be stopping. So you've got American guns fueling the violence, but what about the money? Where does all that cash go? Well, that's where a new global player comes in, and the way they do it has completely changed the game.
Yeah. Forget the movies with suitcases full of cash getting loaded onto planes. That's old school. The real players now, they're Chinese companies and their financial networks, operating right here in the US, Canada, and Mexico. And they have built a system that is almost totally invisible to Western law enforcement. So how does it work? Get this. The cartel's drug money, actual cash, is taken to a totally legitimate Chinese-owned business. From there, that money is
instantly zapped into the Chinese banking system using everyday money transfer apps. And boom, once it's in that system, it's gone. It's basically untraceable. Then, the clean money comes back to the cartels in Mexico as clean pesos. It's brilliant, it's fast, and it just goes to show you these criminal groups are operating on a whole other level.
So when you put all this together, the myth of El Chapo, the real corruption, this crazy international network, you realize we've been looking at this whole thing the wrong way. We're not just fighting crime here. We're up against something much, much bigger.
The word Ed Calderon uses is really specific, and it's important. He calls it a narco-insurgency. And that's not just a fancy term. It means this isn't a crime problem you can solve with more cops on the street. No, this is a low-intensity war being fought by hundreds of armed groups that are trying to take political control using absolute terror and violence. And if you need proof that this war is getting worse, not better, just look at 2020. The entire world shuts down for a pandemic, right? And yet, that year was the single most violent year in Mexico's recorded history. Think about that. Nothing slowed them down. In fact, it seems to be getting worse.
So after all that, the big question is, who's winning? And the answer from Calderon, the guy who saw it all firsthand, is simple, and it's chilling. He says they are. The cartels, the insurgents, they're winning.
And that has to leave you with one last, kind of scary question. Don't think for a second this is all happening somewhere far away. We're talking about tens of millions of dollars being laundered right out in the open in places like the LA Fashion District. This is already here. It's in our backyard. So the real question is, what happens when we can't pretend it's not our problem anymore?